The golden sun of the Andros galaxy shone over a quiet moon, its pale dunes stretching to the horizon. It was a lonely place, forgotten by travelers and untouched by time. And on that silent land, a single ship lay broken, its metal torn apart, smoke rising into the cold sky. From the wreckage, a woman crawled out, her royal gown shredded and covered in ash. Her name was Lysara, queen of the Varelian Empire, ruler of 10,000 worlds. But at that moment, she looked nothing like a queen, only a wounded soul lost among the stars. Her hands trembled as she tried to walk. The crash had left her weak and disoriented. The sand burned her skin and her throat was dry. For the first time in her life, she felt small, fragile, and afraid. Her guards were gone, her ship destroyed, and her power meant nothing here. Hours passed as she wandered aimlessly across the desert moon. The two suns began to set and the cold crept in fast. Her vision blurred. She whispered to herself, "Is this how a queen dies? Alone and forgotten?" Her legs gave out and she fell to her knees, her tears freezing before they touched the ground. She thought of her people, her empire, the endless duties that had stolen her joy. A quiet regret filled her heart. But before darkness took her, she heard something, a faint hum, the sound of an engine cutting through the wind. She lifted her head weakly and saw lights in the distance moving closer. A ship landed nearby, small and battered, its hull patched together from mismatched parts. From it stepped a man wearing a simple jacket and dusty boots. His face was rough, his beard unshaven, and his eyes carried the tired calm of someone who had seen too much. He knelt beside her without a word and offered her a flask. "Drink," he said softly. His voice was deep but gentle. She hesitated for a moment, staring at the human, an alien to her kind, a being her empire barely considered civilized. Yet his eyes were full of genuine concern, not fear, not greed, only compassion. She took the flask and drank. The water burned down her dry throat and tears filled her eyes. Who are you?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "Just a man trying to help." He carried her to his ship, his movements careful as if she were something fragile. Inside, the cabin was small but warm. He wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and started a small heater. He worked quietly, his hands moving with the calm precision of someone used to surviving alone. When she finally found her voice, she asked, "Why did you help me? You don't even know who I am?" He shrugged. "Didn't need to. You were hurt. That's enough." No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Every being in her empire bowed before her name. Yet this man, this human, treated her not as a queen but as a person. There was no fear in his tone, no attempt to please or flatter her. Just simple kindness. As she rested, she observed him. His name, she soon learned, was Ethan Cole. He was a wanderer, a mechanic who traveled from planet to planet fixing ships for a living. His vessel was old and scarred, a relic of some forgotten war. He lived simply, alone, without servants or guards, without any trace of wealth or power. Over the next few days, Ethan repaired her beacon and helped her recover. He cooked small meals, told quiet stories about his travels, and taught her how to make coffee, something she had never tasted before. She found it bitter but strangely comforting. Sometimes at night she caught him staring at the stars through the viewport, his expression distant, full of sorrow. "You miss your home," she said once. He smiled sadly. "Yeah, it's a long way from here." "What happened to it?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. After a long silence, he said softly, "War happened. We survived, but not many of us stayed the same." There was a weight in his voice that made her heart ache. She wanted to ask more, but his eyes told her to let it rest. As days turned to weeks, something unexpected bloomed between them. She found herself smiling again, something she hadn't done in years. Ethan treated her gently but never pitied her. When she tried to give him orders out of habit, he just chuckled and said, "You can command the stars, Your Majesty, but not me." The first time he called her that, she froze. "How did you know?" "I recognized your crest," he said, pointing to a small pendant she wore. "Didn't change how I saw you." That simple answer broke something inside her. All her life she had been seen as a ruler, a symbol, never as a woman. Yet here was a man who looked at her and saw a person, someone worth saving, not for her crown but for her soul. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the dunes, she stood beside him outside the ship. The cold wind brushed against them and the stars shimmered like scattered diamonds. "Ethan," she said quietly. My people believe humans are primitive, dangerous, yet you're the kindest person I've ever met. He laughed softly. We can be both, I guess. Kind when we can, dangerous when we must. She turned to look at him, the moonlight reflecting in her silver eyes. You're a strange man, Ethan Cole. He met her gaze with a gentle smile. I've been called worse. For a moment they stood there in silence, two lost souls sharing the same sky. The queen who had everything and the man who had nothing, yet somehow in that lonely desert, they found peace in each other's presence. When rescue finally arrived, she could have returned to her palace, to her throne, to the life she had known. But when the guards asked who the man beside her was, she simply said, He is with me. Months later, to the shock of the entire Varelian Empire, Queen Lysara of the Thousand Suns announced her marriage to a human wanderer named Ethan Cole, the galaxy whispered. Her council protested, but she ignored them all, because deep down, she knew that she had found something rare, something more powerful than all her crowns combined. She had found love. And though Ethan never spoke much of his past, there was something in his eyes, a quiet fire, that made her wonder who he truly was. But she didn't ask. Not yet, for now it was enough that he was hers, and she was his. The Queen of the Stars had married a humble man, or so she thought. The wedding of Queen Lysara and Ethan Cole shook the entire Varelian Empire like a thunderstorm. It was not just a marriage, it was a scandal. Across the glittering worlds of her realm, nobles whispered in disbelief. A queen, a ruler of 1,000 sons, had chosen a human, a man from a forgotten world, a wanderer with no title, no bloodline, no place among the stars. The palace halls, once filled with songs of loyalty, now echoed with quiet judgment. Her council begged her to reconsider. The high priest declared the union unholy. Even her closest advisors looked at her with pity, but Lysara didn't flinch. She stood tall before them all, her hand resting in Ethan's. He is my choice, she said simply, and I do not seek your approval. The court gasped and the old ministers fell silent. Ethan said nothing. He only looked at her with that calm, grounding gaze that reminded her why she had chosen him in the first place. To him, none of the wealth or status mattered. He wore no crown, no royal robe, just his old jacket patched and faded. He didn't care about politics or power. When others bowed to her, he simply smiled. When others flattered her, he just asked if she'd eaten. To the queen, that simple care meant more than 1,000 praises. Yet, behind the marble walls and diamond towers, the rumors grew sharper. Some called him a usurper, others said he was a spy. Some even claimed the human must have used some trick to capture the queen's heart. Ethan ignored them, but Lysara saw the way he avoided the grand halls, how he stayed away from the banquets and gatherings. He spent most of his days in the royal hangar, fixing old ships with the engineers or helping servants repair broken machines. He was a quiet presence among chaos. Sometimes the younger workers would whisper, "He's the queen's husband," and giggle. He would smile and shrug, replying, "Nah, she's the boss. I just fix things." To many, that humility made him look weak. To Lysara, it made him beautiful. One evening, after another long day of meetings and complaints, she found him sitting alone on the palace terrace. The twin moons cast silver light over the gardens. He was polishing an old metal charm, a small insignia shaped like a bird with spread wings. "What is that?" she asked softly. He looked up, surprised. "This just something from my past." She sat beside him, her gown brushing against his sleeve. "You never talk about your past," he smiled faintly. "That's because it's not a happy one." For a long moment they sat in silence. The air was cool, and the sound of distant music floated through the palace. She looked at him, at the man who had somehow made her heart lighter. "Do you regret marrying me?" she asked suddenly. Ethan turned his head, his eyes soft and steady. "Never, why would I?" "Because of them," she whispered. "The court, the council, they hate you. They say I've dishonored my throne," he chuckled quietly. "Lysara, I didn't marry the throne. I married you." Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such simple, fearless love. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a brief, precious moment she wasn't a queen, just a woman who was loved. But outside that quiet world, the galaxy grew darker. The Dominion swarm, An ancient enemy that had been raiding border systems for years was gathering strength. Their ships devoured planets and left nothing but ashes. Even the Varelian fleets, proud and powerful, struggled to defend against them. The council met every day to discuss strategy, but no plan seemed enough. The swarm's numbers were endless. Lysara watched as fear spread through her empire like a disease. People lost faith, worlds fell silent, and all the while she stood before her people, hiding her own dread behind a mask of royal calm. One night she found Ethan watching the war reports on the holoscreen. Images of burning cities and dying soldiers flickered in the dark room. She sighed, her voice heavy. Every battle we lose, more lives are taken. I feel helpless. He didn't speak at first. His eyes were fixed on the images, but there was something in his expression. A cold focus, a shadow she had never seen before. Finally, he said quietly, "The swarm. I've seen their kind before," Lysara frowned. "You have?" He nodded slowly. "Different names, same hunger. We fought them long ago. On my homeworld, there were wars that tore continents apart. I learned one thing then. Monsters like that don't stop. They don't understand peace. Only strength." She shivered at his tone. It was calm, but behind it lay something sharp, dangerous. For a moment she didn't see her gentle husband. She saw someone else, a man forged in fire, someone who had lived through horror she couldn't imagine. "You speak like a soldier," she said softly. He turned away, his voice quiet. "I used to be one." The room fell silent. Lysara stared at him, her heart uneasy. She wanted to ask more, but the look in his eyes stopped her. It wasn't anger, it was pain. Deep, buried pain. That night when she lay beside him, she thought about the man she had married. She loved his kindness, his humor, his quiet strength. But now, she realized there were parts of him she didn't know, parts that slept behind his calm smile. And she wondered what kind of battles had shaped him into the man he was now. Days passed, and the war drew closer. Reports arrived of the swarm moving toward the central worlds. The council begged the queen to seek help from other empires, but she refused to abandon her people. Through it all, Ethan stayed by her side, not as a guard or a soldier, but as a husband. He fixed her comms when they failed, cooked for her when she forgot to eat, and held her when the nights grew heavy with fear. One morning, as dawn lit the marble corridors, Lysara found him outside again, looking up at the sky. "They'll come here soon," he said quietly. She nodded, her throat tight. "Yes." He looked at her then, his gaze steady and full of love. "When they do, I'll keep you safe." She smiled weakly. "You always say that." "And I always mean it," he replied. She reached out, touched his face gently. "You're only one man, Ethan." He smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's enough." She didn't understand what he meant then. Not yet, but deep inside, something told her that the day would come when she'd see the truth behind those words, and that the humble man she had married was far more than he appeared. The warning sirens echoed across the royal city. The sky burned red as the Dominion swarm entered Varelian space. Giant shadow-like ships, black as oil and alive with strange movement, blocked the stars. They were not machines. They were living weapons, creatures born from death and hunger. Every citizen of the Empire knew what it meant. The swarm had come, and they never left survivors. From her palace balcony, Queen Lysara watched in horror as explosions lit the horizon. Her once peaceful world was now a battlefield. The air trembled with the roar of distant cannons, and her heart pounded with helpless fear. She had led her people with wisdom and peace, but now peace was worthless. Her advisors ran through the halls, shouting orders. Ships were preparing for evacuation. The royal fleet was assembling, but the queen could already see it. Her proud fleet, the strongest in the quadrant, was falling apart before the swarm's might. She turned and found Ethan standing quietly behind her. He wasn't wearing armor. He wasn't shouting orders. He just stood there calm and steady, watching the chaos outside. "They've breached the outer defense line," Lysara whispered, her voice breaking. "They'll be here within the hour. My fleet, my people, they're dying." Ethan's eyes followed the burning sky. His face didn't change, but something cold flickered behind his calm. "Where's your command center?" he asked quietly. "Ethan, it's too dangerous." "Where?" he repeated. She hesitated, then pointed toward the lower district, where the royal command tower rose above the city. There, but it won't matter. The swarm's main dreadnought just entered orbit. Our weapons can't pierce its shields. Ethan nodded slowly. Then it's time I stopped pretending. Before she could ask what he meant, he turned and walked away. The command tower was filled with chaos. Officers shouted into broken comms. Soldiers rushed to their stations and screens flashed red warnings. When Ethan entered, no one recognized him at first. Just a human wearing a worn jacket moving like he belonged there. A guard tried to stop him. "Sir, civilians are not allowed." Ethan raised his wrist. The guard froze. Embedded in his skin was a small metallic chip that glowed faintly blue. The computers around them reacted instantly, their systems recognizing the ancient signal. The main screen flickered, and an old Earth emblem appeared. TDF, Terran Defense Force. "Authorization accepted," a mechanical voice said. "Commander Ethan Cole, active status restored." The entire room went silent. Lysera arrived seconds later, breathless. She stared at the glowing symbol, then at her husband. "Ethan, what is this?" He looked back at her, his voice steady but filled with something she had never heard before. "Command. It's what I used to be. Before I met you?" He turned toward the consoles and began typing commands faster than any Varelian officer could follow. The systems reconfigured, unlocking hidden protocols. The old freighter in the royal hangar, the one everyone thought was junk, suddenly came alive. Lights flickered across its surface, panels shifted, revealing hidden weapons, and an old AI system powered on for the first time in decades. A deep, mechanical voice spoke through the comms. "Welcome back, Commander Cole. Systems online." Awaiting orders, Lysera's heart raced. "That ship?" "It's military." He nodded without looking at her. "Not just military. It's human-made old war tech. From the last days of Earth," she stepped closer. "Ethan, you told me Earth was gone." "It is," he said quietly. "But not everything we built died with it." The officers looked at him with disbelief. To them, humans were a primitive species. Brave, perhaps, but small, reckless, insignificant. Yet here was a human commanding technology that their empire couldn't even understand. The Queen's hand trembled. You were a soldier?" Ethan's lips tightened. "I was a commander in the Terran Defense Force. We fought monsters like these long before your people ever saw them. The swarm isn't new, Lysera. They just found another galaxy to feed on." Before she could respond, an explosion rocked the tower. The ground shook violently and alarms blared. The swarm's main ship had entered the atmosphere. Ethan turned to her, his eyes fierce. "Stay here. Seal the palace. No one leaves until I'm done." "Ethan, you can't fight them alone," she cried, grabbing his arm. He met her gaze. "I fought worse, and then he was gone." Moments later, the sky split open. Ethan's ship, once a quiet freighter, rose from the hangar like a phoenix reborn. Its dull metal hull shifted, revealing sleek black armor and glowing blue wings of energy. Turrets extended from its sides and a plasma cannon unfolded beneath it. The ground forces looked up in shock. Inside the cockpit, Ethan sat at the controls. His voice was calm, his hands steady. AI linked targeting systems to swarm dreadnought. Targets acquired. Estimated survival rate 3.6%, the AI said coldly. Ethan smirked. "That's 3.6% better than last time." The engines roared and the ship shot into the sky. From the palace balcony, Lysera watched in awe. Her people screamed and ran as the swarm descended like a storm. Then, above it all, she saw a single streak of light rising against the darkness. Ethan's ship cut through the enemy like lightning, blasting apart organic fighters with bursts of plasma fire. His movements were precise, every shot calculated. It was as if he had done this 1,000 times before. "Who is he?" one of her guards whispered. Lysera's lips trembled as she whispered, "My husband." High above the city, Ethan fought like a force of nature. He didn't just pilot. He commanded the air itself. Every enemy he destroyed filled his screens with fire, but he didn't slow down. He spoke to his AI with the calm of a man who had long accepted death. When the swarm dreadnought fired its main cannon, Ethan's ship rolled aside at the last second, counterattacking with a barrage of kinetic rounds. The shockwave ripped through the clouds. He pushed his systems beyond their limits, sweat dripping down his face. "Ethan, structural integrity at 42%, the AI warned. "Keep it together," he growled. "We're not done yet." He remembered the old war, the faces of his comrades, the last stand of Earth, the day humanity fell. He had run from that war hoping to find peace. But now peace was a luxury he could no longer afford, not when Lysara was in danger, not when her people were dying. In the command tower, Lysara stood frozen before the holographic display. She could see his ship dancing among the enemy, one man against an army. Every time she thought he would fall, he rose again. Every time the swarm grew stronger, he found a way through. Her heart ached with pride and fear. She had married a humble man, a kind man, but now she realized he was also something far more. He was a survivor of humanity's darkest war. He was a weapon the galaxy had forgotten. He was Ethan Cole. As the night sky burned with fire and light, Queen Lysara whispered through tears, "Please, come back to me." And above her, in the heart of battle, the humble man she loved became the storm that defied death itself. The battle raged like a storm across the sky of Virelia Prime. Ethan's ship danced between death and fire, a single spark fighting an endless swarm. Every explosion painted the heavens red. Every scream from the comms reminded him of what he had lost long ago. Inside the palace, Queen Lysara could do nothing but watch the screens. Her eyes followed the small light that was her husband's ship, moving with impossible speed among hundreds of enemies. The sound of the comms, the constant warnings, the cries of her soldiers, it was all too much. Yet she couldn't look away. For the first time, she saw Ethan not as her quiet husband or her humble mechanic, but as a warrior, a man who carried the fire of humanity inside him. "Your Majesty," one of the officers said, panic in his voice, "he's engaging the dreadnought alone. He won't survive the blast radius." Lysara's heart pounded. "He will," she whispered. "He has to." In the cockpit, Ethan gripped the controls tightly. His ship's system screamed in protest, sparks flying from broken panels. The AI's voice echoed around him. "Commander, the main reactor is unstable. If you continue this course, both the enemy and this vessel will be destroyed." Ethan wiped the blood from his brow. "Good," he muttered. He remembered another day, another battle so many years ago. Earth burning under alien fire, his squad screaming through the comms. The sky full of black smoke. He had been younger then, stronger and full of hope. But hope had died when his home turned to ashes. He had promised himself never to fight again. Never to be the weapon that war demanded him to be. That promise had kept him wandering, far from battle, far from pain, until he met Lysara, until he found something worth protecting again. He switched to manual control. The ship's engines roared like thunder as he broke through the enemy's last defensive line. "AI, reroute all power to forward cannons," he ordered. "Warning, that will disable shields. Do it. Confirmed." The glow of the ship's weapons intensified. A long line of plasma energy gathered beneath the hull, ready to strike. Ethan's face was calm, but his eyes burned with fierce determination. He opened the comms. "This is Commander Ethan Cole of the Terran Defense Force. You want this world? You'll have to go through me." The swarm answered with a roar that wasn't human, a sound that shook the sky. Dozens of organic fighters charged at him. Ethan smiled bitterly. "Come on then. Let's finish this." Down below, the people of Virelia watched in awe. The queen stood among them now, no longer hiding behind palace walls. Her gown was torn, her crown forgotten. She stood in the dust beside soldiers and citizens, all looking up at the same sky. Every flash of light made her heart stop. Every explosion felt like a dagger in her chest. She could hear the faint hum of his voice through the communicator on her wrist. "Lysara," he said between static. "Remember what you told me the day we married?" Her lips trembled. "I told you that I would follow you anywhere." He chuckled weakly. "Then stay right there. I'll find my way back to you." Tears filled her eyes. "You better," she whispered, "because I won't forgive you if you don't." The transmission cut off as another explosion shook the horizon. In orbit, Ethan's ship approached the massive swarm dreadnought. The creature-like vessel opened its mouth, releasing a storm of red plasma. Ethan dodged left, but one beam hit his side, tearing off a wing. The entire ship spun wildly. Warnings blared. "Stabilizers offline. Reactor critical," the AI announced. Ethan gritted his teeth, forcing the ship under control. His hands shook, but his eyes were steady. "We're not done yet." He fired his cannons again and again, each blast cutting deep into the enemy's hull. Green blood-like fluid burst from the wounds, scattering across the void. Still the dreadnought advanced, unstoppable. The AI spoke again. Commander, the reactor will detonate in 2 minutes. There is no safe distance. Ethan's voice softened. Lysara needs time to evacuate. That's enough, Commander. Override safety protocols. Begin countdown. There was silence. Then the AI obeyed. Countdown initiated. 2 minutes. He leaned back in his seat, breathing hard. The ship shook violently around him. Through the cracked glass, he could see the planet below, the cities, the lights, the people. He thought of Lysara's smile, her laughter, the way she looked at him as if he was more than the ghost he had become. She made me believe again, he whispered. That's more than I ever deserved. He pulled the manual lever, setting the course directly into the dreadnought's heart. The engines flared brighter than ever before. Ethan! Lysara screamed into her communicator. Don't you dare do this! You come back right now! Static answered her. Then faintly his voice came through. I love you, Lysara. You gave me something I thought I'd lost. No, she cried. Don't say goodbye. You promised. I'm not saying goodbye, he said softly. Just see you soon. The connection died. Lysara fell to her knees, her tears mixing with the dust. Around her, her people stood frozen, their eyes locked on the sky. And then it happened. A massive explosion lit the heavens. The dreadnought's core burst open, fire and light spilling across the sky like a sunrise. The shockwave rolled through the clouds, shaking the ground beneath them. The swarm began to collapse. One by one, their ships fell, lifeless and burning. The invaders that had destroyed dozens of worlds were gone, but so was Ethan. The silence that followed was unbearable. Lysara stood slowly, her heart hollow. The sky still glowed faintly where the explosion had been. She whispered his name again and again as if saying it would bring him back. Her guards approached carefully. Your Majesty, one said softly. He saved us all. She didn't answer. She just kept staring at the sky, her eyes full of tears that refused to fall. That night, when the fires had cooled and the stars returned, the Queen walked alone to the royal gardens. The air smelled of smoke and ash. She looked up at the heavens and whispered, You foolish human. You said you'd find your way back. A soft wind brushed her face. And for a fleeting second, she thought she heard his voice in the breeze. Told you, I'm hard to kill. She smiled through her tears. Somewhere deep in her heart, she knew the story wasn't over. Because Ethan Cole was human. And humans. They had a way of coming back from the impossible. The world mourned him. For days, the skies above Virelia Prime were silent. The flames of war had faded, but so had the light in Queen Lysara's heart. Everywhere she went, people bowed, whispered, and spoke of the human who saved them all. Statues were built, songs were sung, and the name Ethan Cole became a legend. But Lysara didn't want a legend. She wanted him. She walked the gardens where they once sat together, where he had laughed while fixing her hover chair, telling stories of earth, of oceans, rain, and music. Now there was only silence. Every night she sat beneath the stars, staring at the one place he vanished, the broken patch of sky where the dreadnought exploded. Her people celebrated victory. She only felt loss. Even her council tried to comfort her. Your Majesty, said General Veyron, he died a hero. He gave us our world back. We must honor him by rebuilding. Lysara looked at the old general, her golden eyes dim. Rebuilding means nothing if the heart that made it worth protecting is gone. She stood and turned away before her tears could fall. But far above the planet, in the silent graveyard of ships, something stirred. Among the floating wreckage and shattered hulls, a small emergency pod blinked weakly. Inside, a single human heartbeat echoed. Ethan Cole was not dead. He was broken, bleeding, but alive. The AI's flickering voice whispered through the pod's speakers. Commander, you are alive. Minimal oxygen remains. Recommend entering cryostasis. He could barely move, his vision dark and blurry. Lysara, he croaked. Is she safe? Planet secure. Enemy destroyed. He exhaled slowly, a weak smile forming on his cracked lips. Good, then let's get home. The AI paused. Warning. Put propulsion offline. Long-range beacon damaged. Rescue probability less than 2%. Ethan chuckled softly despite the pain. Yeah, that sounds about right. His hands, trembling and burned, reached toward the control panel. Then we do it the human way. We survive. He rerouted the last bit of power to the beacon and fell into unconsciousness, drifting between stars. Weeks passed. Lysera's council begged her to rest, to focus on ruling, but she couldn't. Each night she replayed his last message in her mind. I'm not saying goodbye. Just, see you soon. She clung to those words like a lifeline. She ordered every ship to scan the debris field. Thousands of drones searched the void, but nothing was found. The council called it foolish hope. Her people called it denial, but she refused to stop. Until one night her scientist rushed into the throne room breathless. Your Majesty, we found something. A weak human distress beacon near the outer ring. Lysera's heart froze. Show me. The screen lit up with the signal. A faint pulse, but unmistakable. She didn't wait for her guards. Prepare my ship now. Your Majesty, it could be a trap, the general protested. Then I'll face it myself, she said firmly. Because if there's even a chance it's him, I'm not leaving him behind. Her ship soared through the night sky, breaking through clouds and into the void. Lysera stood at the viewport, her hands shaking. The stars blurred as they neared the coordinates. When the pod came into view, her breath caught. It was small, scorched, and barely intact, but it was human. Dock it, she ordered. The crew worked fast, pulling the pod into the bay. As the doors opened, smoke hissed out. Lysera ran forward before anyone could stop her. She tore open the hatch, and there he was. Ethan lay motionless, his body wrapped in torn flight gear, face pale and cold. For a moment, she thought he was gone. Then she heard it. A faint, shallow breath. Her hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling freely. He's alive! Get the medics, now. The medics rushed in, connecting wires and injecting stabilizers. His heart monitor beeped weakly, but it was there. A rhythm, a sign of life. Lysera dropped to her knees beside him, taking his hand gently. I told you not to break your promises, she whispered, her voice trembling. His eyes fluttered open slightly, barely able to focus. He saw her face, tears shining under the soft blue lights. His cracked lips curved into the faintest smile. Told you, he whispered weakly. Hard to kill. Then he passed out again. For days he drifted between life and death. Lysera stayed beside him through it all. She held his hand during the fevers, wiped his sweat, whispered stories of how the people praised him. You're a hero now, she said softly, brushing his hair back. But I just want my husband back. Sometimes, he'd mumble in his sleep, names, places, memories of Earth. She'd listen quietly, realizing that even after all this time, there were parts of him she never knew. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan finally opened his eyes fully. The soft light reflected in them. He looked around, confused, then at her. Lysera, she smiled through tears. You're safe, Ethan, you're home. He reached up, his hand trembling, touching her cheek. Did we win? She nodded. Yes, because of you. He sighed in relief and closed his eyes again, whispering, Then it was worth it. No, she said, holding his hand tighter. Not if it cost you, he smiled faintly. Guess I need to stop dying so much. Lysera laughed softly, the sound mixed with tears. Yes, please do. Weeks later, he was strong enough to walk again. The palace was alive with light and celebration. When he stepped onto the balcony beside Lysera, thousands of people below cheered his name. He looked out at them, humbled and quiet. They treat me like some hero, he muttered. Lysera looked up at him, her eyes full of pride. You are, whether you believe it or not. He shook his head with a smile. I'm just a man who got lucky. Lucky? She teased. You faced death itself. He turned to her, his eyes gentle. No, I mean lucky that I found you. She blushed slightly, resting her head on his shoulder. For a moment the world felt peaceful again. The stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if celebrating his return. Later that night, after everyone slept, Ethan stood alone in the balcony, staring at the horizon. He thought of Earth, his lost home, and the strange path that led him here. He whispered softly, If anyone's listening, tell them humanity's still out here, still fighting, still loving. Behind him, Lysera wrapped her arms around his waist. Talking to the stars again? She asked softly. He smiled. Yeah, maybe they're listening. She rested her head on his back. If they are, they'll hear this. Thank you for sending him to me. He turned and kissed her forehead gently. You saved me too, Lysera, more than you'll ever know. And for the first time since the war ended, They both looked at the stars not with sorrow but with hope, because against all odds, the humble man who once ran from his past had found something far greater than victory. He had found love worth dying and living for. Peace never lasts forever. Even though Virelia, Prime healed from the war, the shadow of destruction never fully left. The people rebuilt their homes, the soldiers returned to their families, and the stars once again shone over the quiet nights. But for Ethan Cole, the silence was strange. He had been a soldier for so long that peace felt almost unreal. Every morning he walked through the royal gardens, breathing the clean air. He watched the flowers bloom, the children laugh, the people live without fear. And yet inside he carried a quiet unease. He didn't know why. It was like something inside him was waiting for the next storm. Lysera noticed it first. She would often find him standing at the balcony before sunrise, staring at the horizon. His face calm, but his eyes distant. One morning, she approached him quietly. "You're awake again before dawn." He smiled softly without turning around. "Old habit. Soldiers don't sleep much." She stepped beside him, the wind brushing her silver hair. "You don't have to be a soldier anymore, Ethan. You saved this world. You've earned peace." He looked at her, his gaze gentle. "Maybe, but peace doesn't come free, Lysera. It's something we have to guard." She frowned slightly. "You sound like a man expecting war." He sighed. "Maybe I am." For a moment they stood in silence, watching the first rays of sunlight touch the city below. Weeks passed, and for a while life seemed normal. Ethan began helping rebuild the outer colonies. The people adored him, not just as a hero but as one of their own. He never demanded honor, never acted like royalty. He worked with the engineers, fixed machines, and shared meals with the workers. Lysera loved watching him like that. The humble man she married, with the heart of a protector. Sometimes she would join him quietly, sitting beside him as he repaired old drones or adjusted the city's shields. He would tell her about human inventions, about how people on Earth used to build cities that touched the clouds. She'd laugh softly. "You humans never stopped dreaming, did you?" He smiled. "Dreaming kept us alive." And for a while, the Queen and the human forgot the scars of war. Then came the message. It was late at night when one of the palace guards rushed into their chambers. "Your Majesty!" Urgent transmission from the outer colonies. Ethan and Lysera exchanged a worried glance. "Play it," she ordered. The hologram flickered to life, showing a panicked officer covered in soot. "Your Majesty, this is Outpost Delta. Unknown ships detected. Repeating, unknown ships." The signal cut off in static. Ethan's face hardened instantly. "Show me the coordinates." Lysera hesitated. "Ethan, it could be pirates, scavengers." He shook his head. "No, that wasn't pirates. That was fear." He turned toward the command table, already pulling up tactical maps. "If those ships are what I think they are, we don't have time to wait." "Ethan," she said softly, "you just recovered. You can't go charging into another war." He looked at her, and for a brief second she saw something in his eyes. A storm she thought was gone. "I'm not charging," he said quietly. "I'm protecting what we built." By morning he was gone. Lysera stood on the landing deck as his ship rose into the skies, leaving trails of blue fire. She wanted to stop him, to hold him back, but she knew better. Ethan wasn't running toward battle. He was running toward duty, she whispered softly as his ship disappeared into the clouds. "Come back to me, Ethan, don't make me wait again." Out among the stars, the silence of space broke once more. Ethan's fighter slipped through the void, its sensors glowing with warnings. He found the wreck of Outpost Delta, a floating graveyard. The station was in ruins, torn apart by something massive. He activated his recorder. "Command log, Ethan Cole. Delta outpost destroyed. No survivors. Unknown enemy signature detected." His ship's AI scanned the area. Energy readings, similar to swarm technology, but different, evolved. Ethan's eyes narrowed. So they're not gone after all. He zoomed in on a piece of debris. Strange black veins crawled over the metal, pulsing faintly with red light. "Damn it," he muttered. "They're adapting." He knew what this meant. The swarm wasn't dead. It had survived, changed, waiting for the right moment to return. And now it had found them again. When Ethan returned to Virelia, he didn't bring comfort. He brought warning. Inside the council chamber, he stood before Lysera and her generals. showing the recordings. The room fell silent as the alien remains pulsed on the hologram. General Veyron slammed his fist on the table. Impossible! The swarm's hive mind was destroyed. Ethan shook his head grimly. You destroyed one hive. There could be more. These things evolve, they learn from defeat. Lysera's expression turned cold with fear. Then they'll come back, he nodded. And this time they'll be smarter. The council erupted in arguments, some calling for evacuation, others for defense. But Ethan's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Listen to me. You can't fight this war the same way. They'll expect your tactics. You need to be unpredictable. You need to fight like humans do. Veyron glared. And what does that mean, human? Ethan's eyes hardened. It means you fight dirty. You hit them where they don't expect. You survive by any means necessary. The Queen looked at him, her voice calm but firm. And you'll lead them, won't you? He hesitated, then nodded slowly. If it means protecting you, yes. That night, Lysara found him sitting alone in the hangar, staring at his ship. She walked up quietly. So it begins again. He didn't look up. It never really ended. She knelt beside him, her hand gently on his. You're not alone this time, Ethan. You have me. You have all of us. He turned to her, eyes soft but full of worry. You don't understand, Lysara. When humans fight, we don't stop. We burn everything to protect what we love. And sometimes, that fire takes everything with it. She cupped his face in her hands. Then let me share that fire. For a moment, they stayed like that. Two souls from different worlds united by something stronger than war. He smiled weakly. You always say the right thing, you know that? She smiled back. That's why you married me, remember? He chuckled softly, the tension easing for a brief moment. Yeah, I remember. But as the alarms echoed faintly in the distance, both of them knew the truth. Peace was fading. The storm was rising again, and this time, it wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for everything they loved. The skies of Virelia burned again. Dark clouds rolled over the planet's horizon as the stars vanished behind swarms of living metal. The evolved enemy, the new swarm, had returned. Stronger, faster, and far more ruthless than before. Ethan Cole stood on the command bridge, his uniform torn, his face shadowed by the red light of battle. Around him, holograms showed countless enemy ships descending through the atmosphere. Every heartbeat brought them closer. Queen Lysara stood beside him, calm but fierce. She wore armor now, silver and blue, engraved with her royal crest. Her eyes glowed faintly with determination, not fear. Ethan, she said softly, the evacuation ships are ready. We can still save the civilians, he nodded. Good, get them out. I'll hold the line, she frowned. We'll hold the line. He turned to her, his expression hard. Lysara, I can't risk you. If something happened, she interrupted, voice trembling with emotion. Don't you dare finish that sentence. I lost you once. I will not lose you again, their eyes locked. No words were needed. He reached out and touched her cheek gently. You're stubborn, she smiled faintly. I learned from the best, the alarms wailed. The battle had begun. Ethan's command echoed through the speakers. All squadrons, launch. Don't let them breach the atmosphere. Thousands of ships shot into the sky like silver arrows. The first wave of the new swarm collided with them and space erupted in chaos. Explosions tore across the void, painting the heavens in fire. Ethan's fighter roared out of the hangar, engines blazing. His voice filled the comms. This is Cole. Focus fire on the hive carriers. Cut off their command links. He moved through the storm of light and metal, weaving between enemy beams with impossible precision. He was no longer the humble mechanic Lysara once met. He was humanity's fury given form, a warrior forged by endless loss. From the palace war room, Lysara watched his ship dance across the sky. Her hands trembled as she commanded her forces. Defensive shields at maximum. Redirect power to the northern towers. The ground shuddered as enemy pods slammed into the surface, releasing hordes of insect-like creatures. Her guards rushed to defend the palace walls. The city was under siege, but she refused to retreat. Every explosion outside echoed like a heartbeat in her chest. Every flicker of Ethan's ship on the radar made her hold her breath, and then the signal flickered. Ethan? She called through the communicator. Report. Static. Ethan. For a moment, only silence answered. Then his voice came, strained and low. Still here? Taking heavy fire near the upper stratosphere. Their main hive is moving in. Her heart ached. You can't fight that thing alone. He chuckled weakly. You said that last time too. Don't you dare joke right now. I'm not joking, he said softly. I'm remembering. Above the world, Ethan faced the monster, a massive hive ship shaped like a living shadow. It pulsed with red light, each wave of energy stronger than the last. He locked his eyes on it. All right, you ugly thing. Let's finish this. His ship dove straight into the swarm, guns blazing. Plasma fire ripped through enemy ranks. His AI shouted warnings, but he ignored them. Every instinct screamed at him to survive, but he pushed harder, faster. He broke through the outer layer and aimed for the core. If I can't kill you from the outside, he muttered, then I'll do it from within. He overloaded his reactor again, just like before. But this time there was no hesitation, only purpose. Down on the surface, Lysara felt something was wrong. She ran to the hangar, ignoring her guards' protests. Prepare my ship, she ordered. Your Majesty, it's suicide. She glared at them fiercely. Then I'll die beside him. Moments later, her royal cruiser shot into the burning sky. The air shook as she entered orbit, her eyes scanning for Ethan's signal. When she saw his ship heading straight into the hive, her heart stopped. Ethan, don't you dare! His calm voice filled her ears. Lysara, you once asked me why humans fight so hard. This is why. Tears streamed down her cheeks. You can't save the world if you destroy yourself. He smiled faintly, though she couldn't see it. I'm not saving the world, Lysara. I'm saving you. His ship pierced the hive's heart. The light was blinding. Inside, he saw a writhing mass of red energy. Alive, intelligent, hateful. The swarm's core, the AI spoke in its fading tone. Commander, reactor overload in 20 seconds. There is no escape. Ethan's hand rested on the control panel. I know. He whispered one last message into the comm. Lysara, remember what I said the first time? Her voice broke. You said you'd find your way back to me. He smiled softly. Then wait for me. I'll find you again. And then, light. The explosion tore through the sky, brighter than dawn. The hive shattered into pieces, disintegrating in a wave of blue fire. The new swarm screamed across every frequency, then fell silent forever. The war was over. For a long time, nothing moved. The stars slowly returned, shining over a world saved twice by one man. Lysara's ship floated among the wreckage, her tears falling silently. The comms were dead. The only thing left was the echo of his last words. She closed her eyes, whispering, You promised, Ethan. You promised. Weeks passed. The world celebrated its victory once more, but the Queen did not smile. She ruled with grace, but her heart lived in the stars. Every night she stood by the balcony, whispering his name to the wind. Until one quiet evening, her communicator flickered. A weak, distorted voice came through. Lysara, if you can hear me, I told you, I'm hard to kill. Her breath caught. Ethan? The signal was faint, distant. Ship damaged, but alive, somewhere near the outer ring, coming home soon. She covered her mouth as tears flooded her eyes. You stubborn fool, she whispered, smiling through the tears. You really are impossible. When his ship finally returned days later, half broken and covered in ash, the entire planet gathered to witness it. As the ramp lowered, Ethan limped out, armor burned and torn, but alive. Lysara ran across the platform and threw her arms around him. He held her tight, whispering against her hair, Told you I'd find my way back. She pulled back just enough to look into his tired eyes. You always do. The crowd erupted into cheers, but neither of them heard. For them, there was only the sound of two hearts beating again, together. That night, as the stars shimmered across the sky, Lysara rested her head on his shoulder. Do you think it's finally over? She asked softly. Ethan looked up at the stars and smiled faintly. No, the universe is full of monsters. She frowned slightly. Then what will we do? He turned to her, his voice calm and steady. We'll face them together, she smiled. And together they looked out at the endless night. Because peace wasn't about the end of war, it was about standing beside the one who made survival worth it. And for the alien queen who once thought she married a humble man, she finally understood what he truly was. He was human, and that meant unstoppable.